We are less than a week away until the legal tampering period for free agency begins, and that means teams were scrambling last minute to get their franchise tags done. Some of these potential free agents, do they need to stick where they've been for at least another year? Or is the grass greener on the other side, and now it's time to test free agency? Can we talk about the fact that the reigning Super Bowl MVP could end up playing for a different team to open 2026? Because that's exactly what could happen with Kenneth Walker after the Seattle Seahawks decided not to place the franchise tag on him and are now allowing him to hit free agency. And if you've been watching this offseason, you shouldn't be shocked by that, because I'm not. That's a lot of money that they would have had to dedicate to a running back, when even though Zach Charbonnet is going to miss a big portion of the 2026 season, he's still kind of the guy behind Kenneth Walker now. So don't be shocked if the Seattle Seahawks decide to go a different route in free agency, grab a veteran running back that's going to cost a whole lot less, and this will allow Kenneth Walker to find the best deal possible on the open market. And there are some teams that we would love to see him with. Obviously, the best landing spot for Kenneth Walker has to be with the Kansas City Chiefs. If that ends up happening, we're talking about a top 12 running back right off the bat, fairly easy. But there's also the Denver Broncos, the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe he does return to Seattle on a much bigger deal. Maybe they do decide to get back into the mix of things. But for Kenneth Walker, it's never been about talent. When you watch him run the football, you can see he's one of the better running backs in all of football. His vision and his patience behind the line of scrimmage, his ability to make tacklers miss, to break tackles, second to none. Yeah, he's got some deficiency issues when it comes to pass blocking, but when you put the ball in his hands, this is a guy that can do anything on the ground. And now he has an opportunity to land somewhere where he can be the guy, the number one. Last year, Seattle, I don't want to say they mismanaged him, but they definitely didn't utilize him to the best of his or their ability. Now, was that great for the playoff run for him to be healthy? Of course it was. But over the course of an entire season, we could have gotten so much more for Kenneth Walker last year. And now that he has an opportunity to find a team where he's the only guy, we could see a ton of success in 2026. For any team heavily invested in adding a running back this offseason that potentially misses out on Kenneth Walker, Travis Etienne could be a great plan B. Jacksonville decided not to tag him, and now he's going to get an opportunity after a huge bounce back campaign in 2025 to try and find better opportunities. And while I think it would be pretty easy for Kenneth Walker to find a better opportunity just because he could go to a team that's going to utilize him as the number one, I think it's going to be tough for Travis Etienne to do the same, because his opportunity in Jacksonville was great. And I even said in one of my earlier offseason videos that Travis Etienne returning to Jacksonville would have been the best case scenario. But it's going to be interesting to see Minnesota. Maybe Seattle tries to replace Kenneth Walker with Travis Etienne. Maybe we see him go to a team like the New York Giants, who now have made conversations about, hey, we want to have a two-headed running back. Cam Scadaboo is not going to be healthy to begin the season. He will at some point in time, but we're not just going to give him the reins when he comes back. What about a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, who have said, hey, we want to add somebody else to Ashton Genty? Do I think they go like Travis Etienne? Probably not. But those are just some of the opportunities that could still be out there for Travis Etienne when free agency starts to close up. And I'm not shocked that Jacksonville decided to forgo the franchise tag on Travis Etienne. You kind of see this when a new coaching regime comes in and takes over a franchise. Some of the guys who have been there are going to get a run for a year, but as soon as their replacement is drafted, they could end up being out the door. And that's what happened when Jacksonville drafted Breece Hall out of Virginia Tech. And we saw pretty early in the offseason last year, after Liam Cohen came in, that there was talk of trading one of the running backs that were already on the roster, Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby. And Etienne was kind of at the forefront of those conversations. But when they couldn't find a trade partner, they went ahead and moved Tank Bigsby. Etienne was the starter last year while Tuitt kind of got his feet underneath him. And now letting Travis Etienne walk would allow Tuitt to become the guy, even though they will probably get somebody to back him up as well. I think after Kenneth Walker's playoff performances, he's destined to land in a really solid spot. Travis Etienne, I'm a little bit more worried about landing in a spot that is actually better for him. So that's something that we will keep an eye on. And if you're new here to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we will do breaking news videos all throughout free agency to make sure that you are getting all of the information that you need right away. And we've got one more running back to talk about, Breece Hall, who was actually franchise tagged by the New York Jets. But what is a franchise tag? If you're not 100% sure, let's break it down for you. Essentially what a franchise tag is going to do, it's going to give an additional year of team control for a player before he is allowed to hit free agency. And the NFL during the offseason will announce what the exact salary would be for that franchise tag. Sort of an average of some of the best players and the highest paid players at that position. If you decide to franchise tag a player, then that is how much you will pay them for the next season. But there's also another element to the franchise tag, very similar to what we're going to see with Breece Hall. Because even though it's going to give the Jets team control for another year, it also gives them the opportunity to potentially get some draft picks. For instance, now that Breece Hall has been franchise tagged, he is allowed to go explore free agency, and he is allowed to negotiate with other teams. And if a team comes to Breece Hall and says, this is the contract that we would like to offer you, and he says, I love that deal, let's do it, the New York Jets get to step in first. If they want to match that deal, then Breece Hall would sign that deal with the New York Jets. However, if the New York Jets don't want to match that deal, then whatever team signing Breece Hall would have to give the New York Jets 2 first-round picks. That's not happening. So yeah, Breece Hall isn't going anywhere. There is no team that's going to be willing to not only sign Breece Hall to a mega deal, but then give up 2 first-round picks on top of it. Worst case scenario, or maybe best case scenario, depending on how you view the New York Jets, Breece Hall is going to be there for 1 more year and likely will hit free agency next year unless they decide to franchise tag him again, which you can do for 2 years. Or he ends up getting a long-term deal done with the New York Jets and he ends up staying in town for several more years to come. Do I love this for Breece Hall? I don't want to say yes because it's the New York Jets and they seem to have widely mishandled him for a couple of years now. But I think it also really depends on what they do at the quarterback position. Right now, they have the number 2 pick in the draft. They're not taking Ty Simpson at number 2. Fernando Mendoza will go at number 1. They're not going to trade a bunch of draft assets to move up 1 spot and draft Fernando Mendoza. So the question becomes in New York, what free agent are you going after? Is it Kyler Murray? Does Kyler Murray come to town for a year or maybe 2 years? Maybe he's the veteran presence that needs a little bit of a rejuvenation in his career, and he's going to get that from New York. Maybe it's somebody else. Maybe they try to invest in Malik Willis instead. That's going to what's going to come down to whether or not I like Breece Hall staying in New York for at least another year. Keep an eye on the quarterback position, and let's see what that ends up meaning for Breece Hall in 2026. Let's move on to wide receivers, and Alec Pierce not being tagged by the Indianapolis Colts was a pretty big shock to me. Now, they could still get a deal done prior to free agency opening, or the legal tampering period as they call it. And if a deal gets done, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I think Alec Pierce realizes that if he goes to free agency and has some communications with other teams, he could end up making a ton of money this offseason. And not only could he make a ton of money, he could also find himself in a way better position than what he has been in Indianapolis, especially considering the fact that Indianapolis has Daniel Jones, doesn't have Daniel Jones, no idea when he's going to be back. Is it going to be Riley Leonard before then? Anthony Richardson is out there looking for trade partners with his agent. So I don't know who's going to be throwing Alec Pierce the ball if he stays in Indianapolis. So I think free agency could end up being the best case scenario for him. And could you imagine if he were to land with a team like the Buffalo Bills? Alec Pierce has led the NFL in yards per reception over the last couple of seasons. He is truly a huge deep threat for any team that were to bring him in. And right now, that deep threat, the way it's utilized in Indianapolis, has been way too inconsistent for a player that has been that good. Pair him with a Josh Allen, and this guy could absolutely erupt. I'm not kidding when I tell you that Alec Pierce could end up maybe being a top 36 fantasy wide receiver, or if he goes to free agency and lands with the right team, we're talking about a guy that has top 12 potential every single week, even if he doesn't end as a top 12 overall. Alec Pierce is really one of the biggest boom free agents that are going to be out there, and where he lands could absolutely shape a huge fantasy season for this guy. I hope he goes to free agency. I hope he tests the market, and I hope he lands with a team that is willing to utilize him way better. George Pickens' 2025 season was absolutely stellar, and I think a lot of people thought that he would thrive in Dallas, but I don't think a lot of people saw what would be coming. And when CeeDee Lamb missed time, George Pickens became an alpha wide receiver one, a true top tier guy. And when CeeDee Lamb came back, there would be some inconsistencies in his production, but he still showed that he could put up numbers. Staying in Dallas was always best case scenario. Maybe being in Dallas does kill a little bit of his upside, but you're not going to find too many situations where George Pickens would actually land in a better spot. CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson to keep double coverage off of him. A solid run game now that you brought Javonte Williams back. And I know Dak Prescott gets a lot of hate, but when it comes to just pure production and giving guys fantasy viable opportunities, Dak Prescott is one of the better quarterbacks in the league for wide receivers. I got no issues with George Pickens being tagged by Dallas. And I do believe that Dallas probably gets a deal done to keep George Pickens in town long term. But at least for 2026, we know George Pickens will stay in Dallas. And that's great because that's where he's got the best opportunity to thrive anyway. Let's move on to the tight end position. Kyle Pitts. Did I think that Kyle Pitts' best case scenario for 2026 was staying in Atlanta? Absolutely I did, but I did not think the Falcons would have the plums to actually franchise tag him and keep him in town for another year. And part of me feels like they're not going to get a long-term deal done. They're going to franchise tag him. He's going to stay in Atlanta for another year. Maybe they walk away next year. Maybe they franchise tag him again. It really depends on what he does this season. But for as inconsistent as Kyle Pitts has been, he's actually in a pretty solid scenario as of right now. And I don't know how many other teams out there would have been a better fit. For Kyle Pitts, he's coming back to a team that just hired an offensive coach in Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski could utilize Kyle Pitts the way that he has so far in his career, more of a wide receiver. Maybe he decides to turn Kyle Pitts more into like a Harold Fannin from last season, where we see a split between the slot and the inline. And maybe we move him around a little bit more instead of just putting him on the outside and letting him go up against top cornerbacks every single game, which is not the best case scenario for Kyle Pitts, even with Drake London in town. So for Kyle Pitts, I think he's got the right head coach now. But it has a lot to potentially do with his quarterback because as of right now, Kirk Cousins seems like he will be the starter for Atlanta to begin 2026. Michael Penix Jr. suffered his third knee injury over the last several years and is going to miss a significant portion of this season. With Kirk Cousins in town on a contract, I don't really think it does a lot of good for Atlanta to cut him loose and try to find somebody else, especially considering how Kirk Cousins played towards the end of the season, when, believe it or not, Kyle Pitts was one of the top fantasy assets in all of fantasy football to end 2025. And those are the inconsistencies that we have become used to with Kyle Pitts. Every once in a while, he's going to have one of those major games that showcases his ability, and then he's going to disappear for 5, 6, 10 games in a row, and you forget that Kyle Pitts exists, you put him on waivers, you yell and you scream about how you wasted a pick on him, all those other things. But at least for a stretch last year with Kirk Cousins, he produced. And I would be willing to bet that Kyle Pitts, while maybe not a consistent top 12 option, could find himself inside the top 12 more often than not now that he's headed back to Atlanta for another season. And if Kirk Cousins remains his quarterback, I'm willing to bet on that. And if that changes for whatever reason, obviously we'll update our opinion at that time. To begin the 2025 season, it seemed like Shane Steichen and the Colts had found their guy at the quarterback position. And it seemed like Daniel Jones had found a new home. He literally played like an MVP candidate to begin the 2025 season. And there were a couple of inconsistencies when he ended up having the injury, but an Achilles tear is no joke. And that's why Daniel Jones was one of the most complex players when it came to what would happen with him this offseason. Now, he has been franchise tagged and likely will be in Indianapolis for at least another year. But what does that year look like? When is he going to be able to return to play? Will he be a shell of his former self? This is a quarterback that utilizes his legs, his ability to move in the pocket, to get outside the pocket, to run with the football. Heck, a non-mobile quarterback like Kirk Cousins had a ton of trouble coming back from an Achilles rupture. Look how terrible he was at times during his first season back in Atlanta. Daniel Jones, whenever he's able to play this year, it could end up being a whole lot of the same thing. But nonetheless, the franchise tag has been placed on Daniel Jones when my opinion was you should have kept it on Alec Pierce. And it seems like the Colts want to get a long-term deal done with Daniel Jones. But I'm not really on board or off board with him in 2026 because as of right now, we're just going to have to sit and wait and try to figure out how much he may actually even end up playing this season. So we'll keep an eye on it. I mean, being in Indianapolis is obviously his best case scenario because that's where he played well last season and he's going to stay with the same coaching staff. If he were to go anywhere else, I think Daniel Jones could end up getting lost in the mix anyway. All right, we got one more player to talk about, and every player so far in this video is someone that is either been franchise tagged or hasn't been franchise tagged. This guy is not included in that group, but because he was informed yesterday that he's going to be released by the Arizona Cardinals before free agency, I said, you know what, let's include Kyler Murray anyway, because I do believe Kyler Murray is going to get a starting job somewhere. It could be with the Pittsburgh Steelers, it could be with the Miami Dolphins, it could be with the New York Jets. Heck, it could end up being with the team we just talked about, a one-year deal for the Indianapolis Colts while Daniel Jones works his way back from injury. It absolutely could be that route, but wherever it is, I believe Kyler Murray will be a starting quarterback in 2026. And depending on where he goes, I think he's still going to be a fantasy relevant starting quarterback because all these teams we just mentioned, he could have fantasy value there, and it could pretty easily be one of the better draft picks of the season as long as his ADP doesn't go too high. So that's something that we will keep an eye on. But I think for Kyler Murray, him and Arizona parting ways were best for him and for Arizona. Now, hopefully, Jacoby Brissett ends up being the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals, and we see Michael Wilson and that offense really run the same way it did to end 2025. And for Kyler Murray, hey, maybe you land with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You got DK Metcalf, New York Jets. You've got Garrett Wilson. Maybe it's the Minnesota Vikings who decide to invest in him for a year to give JJ McCarthy another season. Then you've got Justin Jefferson. You've got Jordan Addison. The Miami Dolphins got Jalen Waddle. You've got really good wide receivers no matter where you land as a starting quarterback. So for Kyler Murray, I think this is a great scenario for him this season. All right, Headliner Nation, do me a favor on the way out, hit the like button. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. If you don't have the bell notifications on, make sure you do that right now. So anytime we drop new content, you're going to know about it right away. And I've got a really fun members only live stream coming up here soon where I'm going to go through breaking down my newly redone NFL draft big board, talking about the NFL draft prospects. So if you're not a member, I would suggest that you take a look at potentially doing that. Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.